there's basically two ways to stop the foreclosure. So first off, I usually try to hit the foreclosures that are at least a month to 2 months out, right? If they've already passed and they're inside ARIA Automator, what happens is they and a lot of happens in these counties across the country, they'll have what's called they'll postpone the sale, and tons of foreclosures get postponed. And they'll get postponed because the seller will call in and say, hey, I just need 2 more weeks to get my money together. So in REI Automator, it's going to show a past date, but if it's still active, you're going to see a past foreclosure date. But that it could be potentially active because the seller requested an additional time. Also, too, right now we have this whole forbearance thing going on with COVID. So it's going to screw up all your dates inside there because, if they had a foreclosure scheduled for April 30th, but now they're in this forbearance, the date's going to pass and the foreclosure is not going to happen. And then you're going to pull a list on May 5th and you're going to see an April 30th date because Trump basically did a mortgage basic forbearance for pretty much everybody. So it's going to be a little bit skewed now with this time. So I would just pull all the foreclosures, whether they fixed it or not, or postponed it, or they're on forbearance, or whatever the case may be, they're still in distress, right? And then if you come to a point, right now with this whole moratorium on foreclosures, you don't have to deal with actually postponing it, right? You don't have to deal with that. You just got to get a payoff from the bank that tells you what the reinstatement amount is to bring it current, and then what the total payoff on that mortgage is. And once you have that payoff, that's your number of what needs to be paid off, plus the cash that's going to go to the seller, essentially is your purchase price. So theoretically, if they have $100,000 in foreclosure and you ask for a payoff and it's $100,000 theoretically, and the seller wants $10,000, your purchase price is essentially $110,000. And you can flip that for, say, $120,000. Cash buyer comes in, they bring in 120, 10,000 goes to you, and 110,000 goes to the 110,000 goes to the 10,000 goes to the seller, and 100,000 goes to the bank. So when foreclosures, essentially they pull the moratorium on them, then there's two ways to stop the foreclosure. One, if you have time, the seller can request an extension because they're in escrow and they have a purchase contract. That's number one. Number two is the seller files Chapter 13 bankruptcy. They file the bankruptcy, and before their initial court date, which is typically 30 to 45 days, you would sell the property, find a buyer, and then dismiss the Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Typically costs about $600 to file that initial bankruptcy. And I usually tell the seller that we'll pay that out of escrow. If you have a foreclosure that's going, let's say it's scheduled for next week, but essentially they can't do it because it's whole moratorium, they're still in distress. They still, if they want to sell their house, if they want to figure out how to sell it, they want to pull equity out of it, you can still contract them. You can still pull a payoff. You can still flip it and sell it. And you can still, wholesale it and make a profit.
Okay.
We're doing deals, all across the country right now. The biggest state we're having problems with right now is Chicago in Illinois. Otherwise, like last week we closed a deal in Phoenix, which was no problem. We closed a deal in Longview, Texas. We closed a deal in Topeka, Kansas for $7,100. The one in Longview, Texas was $17,000. The one here in Phoenix was $26,000. And the one in Akron, Ohio was $16,050. So that's about $66,000 we closed last week on deals that we literally had no problem with. I mean, the property in Akron, we got under contract and literally turned around and found a buyer within a couple days, and then closed it within 7 days. So within about 14 days of getting contract and closing on a $16,000 deal. So there's definitely deals out there for sure, especially right now. And sellers, we have a deal in Phoenix right now. We are under contract for 290. Went back to the seller, renegotiated, got it down to 250, and we're selling it for 270. So sellers are willing to negotiate, especially if there's work that needs to be done on the property. So, which is cool.